As I'm sure you all know, Blade Barrage and Thunder Crash are pretty much staples of any raid team due to their ability to crank up the total damage that you deal. Most of the time, these supers are make or break for contest mode or master raids and can easily shave off an entire DPS phase. I just wanted to make a quick video analyzing the DPS potential that you can achieve with Stasis, primarily on Warlock. Most people don't really think of Stasis when they think of DPS, at least not without Font of Might. However, I'm not going to include Font of Might in this, but rather, I'm mostly going to be focusing on the total damage buffs that Stasis Freeze can apply to your entire team in a DPS phase. First, we're going to go over a quick rundown of what I'm talking about, since using a control debuff to make your team deal more damage doesn't really make much sense on the surface. Stasis Freeze is a status effect that can be applied by most stasis weapons or stasis subclasses, and it completely immobilizes most enemies. When enemies take enough damage to break the freeze, they will shatter, becoming unfrozen and dealing an area of stasis damage around them. The concept of doing DPS with stasis revolves around this principle. By repeatedly applying freeze, you also allow your team to repeatedly activate shatter, allowing their shots to periodically do a large burst of extra damage. Once we calculate this extra damage, we can do some math to extract a percent damage increase, so we can compare it to supers like Thunder Crash or Blade Barrage. First things first though, we're going to need some numbers. I used the Bunker E15 Lost Sector boss for my testing. With Whisper of Fissures, freezing and shattering a target with a Bleak Watcher deals just under 18,000 damage. The reason why these numbers weren't consolidated into a single number is because Whisper of Fissures actually duplicates the Shatter explosion, meaning it hits the enemy twice. Since my Bleak Watchers are dealing damage to the boss, it will allow allies to activate Whisper of Fissures as well without even having it equipped, since the game considers us both to have contributed to the Shatter. Now that we have some damage numbers, we need to get the rate of fire for these Shatter explosions. We can do this by counting the number of freezes that we see in a DPS phase and dividing it by the number of seconds for that fade. I recorded a Golgoroth DPS phase using Bleak Watchers and counted the number of freezes that I saw. I've sped up the footage so you don't have to watch the clip in real time. Before we start though, please know that Stasis Freeze can oftentimes be confused with other effects. I try to use sound and visuals to be able to tell when a freeze was applied, but know that there may be a small margin of error by a few percent. So, you can recount that however you like, but I recorded 44 freezes over a 105 second damage phase. This puts our freezes per second at 0.41. As you can see, a base linear fusion rifle shot deals 54,346 damage. However, with freeze applied, this shot not only deals the 17,666 extra damage from the shatter, but it also increases in damage to 57,064, and also increases the shatter damage by another 1,083. This ends up equating to an increase of damage by 5% total, as well as increases the shatter damage by 1083. So not only does freeze cause you to periodically cause large shatter explosions, but it also causes you to increase your total weapon damage by 5%. So now we can finally do some math. In order to determine the percentage of damage that Stasis Shatter increased our original damage by, we're going to need a formula. This formula is going to be the damage modifier times the total damage without shatter, plus the total shatter damage, all over the total damage without shatter. To find our total damage per second from our weapons, you could use a number of different methods, but since we're talking about linear fusion rifles, we can use the number 1.046 rounds per second to describe the rate of fire. This figure comes from Fallout's linear fusion rifle comparison video. I've put the link in the description if you'd like to check it out. So, our damage per second in this case without any buffs is going to be 56,845, and we'll represent this figure as a capital D to simplify things. Next, we can calculate our shatter damage total. For shatter damage per second, we can simply multiply the total damage increase per shatter by the shatter rate of fire. In this case, our shatter damage per second is 7,243. I'll refer to this figure as a capital S to simplify things. To find our total damage numbers, we simply multiply both these figures by time. To find our freeze damage multiplier, we can just multiply 5% by the rate of fire of the shatters. Since the rate of fire is directly proportional to how many shots that are fired per second will actually trigger the damage multiplier. In our case, this multiplier becomes 1.025. Overall, this makes our damage delta equation equal to 1.025 dt plus st over dt. Since time can be cancelled out due to factoring, the final equation comes out to just 1.025d plus s over d. When we plug this into a calculator, our total damage percent increase comes out to a flat 15.25% damage increase overall with a base linear. Remember that since this function scales inverse linearly with your DPS, this percent damage increase will be higher as your DPS from your weapons lowers, and vice versa. Let's go ahead and look at the Desmos graph to see how it compares to the supers. Overall, we dealt a total of 959,810 damage of the entire damage phase due to just Shatter Damage. To compare this to some of the other ability-based damage, primarily supers, Blade Barrage with max stacks of Star Eater scales and Knock 'em Down sits at 531,653. Thunder Crash with Curse of the Falling Star sits at 472,311. Nova Bomb with Cataclysm sits at 293,633. And then Shatter Damage over a 105 second damage phase eclipses all of these at 959,810. Of course, this number seems huge, and it is, but remember that the total increase in damage that Shatters will grant you is directly proportional to the length of the DPS phase. If this DPS phase were only 25 seconds long, that number would only come out to 233,633, which barely even tickles Cataclysm Nova Bomb. So in general, the longer your damage phase is, the better it's going to perform. So to wrap things up, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the Desmos graph so you guys can play around with it and calculate your own numbers. All lines and variables are labeled. You'll set D equal to your DPS. In the example case, I put a base linear fusion rifle shot, assuming that firing line was on the entire time, and our Radiant and Weaken were on 50% of the time, which was meant to simulate my Golgoroth run. Automatically, you'll see all of the lines format to your DPS number. The slanted lines represent the total damage you'll have dealt at each X, which represents the number of seconds. This way you can see when each line surpasses each other. The shallower slanted line and horizontal lines represent the total amount of damage increase from using each super compared to the Shatter Damage tag. So you can see exactly when Shatter Damage will surpass each super in total damage increase. Just make sure to read the labels and you'll be fine. You can get a few other pieces of information from the graph with those, like your total percent damage increase from using Freeze. If you like this analysis and like what I do, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me to get my channel off the ground and make more stuff like this for you guys. Either way, I hope you liked it and enjoy the rest of your day.